In 3, 2, 1, and here we are. So welcome to the Althea June Community Call. Deborah?
Hi, yes, thanks so much everyone for being here, and thanks for your patience with me. I actually had some flight issues, and I'm joining via mobile. But yeah, really excited to introduce our special guest Osfi today from Net Equity, who's going to take us through our really exciting partnership with the middle mile provider OPTK in Nebraska a little bit later on. But I think we'll start with some just brief introductions. Oh, and it looks like we may even have Gabrielle as well too, so I can introduce you. Can you let her in real quick?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we are live with Gabrielle as well. So we'll start the call off with some introductions, and then Justin, if you can give us a quick tech update, then we'll go ahead and let Osfi talk a little bit about the project in Nebraska, and then Gabrielle, also if you could help us with any questions that come up in the YouTube chat, would appreciate that. All right, so we're going to start with a round of introductions. I am Deborah. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Althea, and we've been working a lot in the field lately with some of our LTE and the emerging fiber networks that are coming up as well. So, all right, turn it over to you, Gabrielle. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure, would love to. Thanks, Deb. Hi, everyone. My name is Gab. I'm currently a collaborator and co-instigator and backer, in fact, of Althea and the team. I collaborate with a few different projects in the space. My background is community and creative things. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here from a community side.
Osfi and then Justin.
Yeah, hi. I'm so happy to be here. I already feel like I've become a part of the Althea community. Just in terms of my background, I am founder of and CEO of Net Equity Networks. Our mission is to make internet affordable for all. Hopefully within a decade. I've in a past life built and grown a cellular tower sharing company. So I kind of know my way around how to finance infrastructure and how to facilitate infrastructure sharing. For the last 5 years, I've basically been obsessed with finding ideas and technologies that can actually bring broadband to all, not just in America, but globally. I'm from Pakistan, and that's where a lot of my, I would say, heart and mind is. And yeah, it's just been a total pleasure, getting to know Althea, getting to know about the technology, particularly the people, both Deborah and Justin. So really happy to be here, and excited to share with you more as we dive more into it.
So, hi, I'm Justin, CTO and co-founder of Althea, and in charge of all things technical in the Althea world. And so, sort of moving right into our first subject here, a sort of tech update across the board, and it's a big board, so bear with me. So, from the top. We have the Althea blockchain, we have Gravity Bridge, we have the Althea router firmware, we have Althea fiber and Althea LTE. So that is the list of subjects that we will be touching on today in a tech update. So the Althea blockchain is mostly just waiting on various logistics challenges and a ready version of the Gravity Bridge. The Gravity Bridge is, we have our 100-person testnet, our 100 validator testnet that has been successfully running for a couple of weeks now. Just a few days ago, we performed a chain upgrade after a test of an Ethereum hard fork. So this is a particular type of failure mode for the bridge that we wanted to make sure worked perfectly, and the recovery mode came back nicely. The bridge halted when it detected the failure, and it replayed everybody's transactions when we told it was safe to do so. Perfect. So very happy there. We're continuing to make good testing progress, and our next steps are tests against production Ethereum and generally preparing Gravity to go all the way and be used sort of outside of a testnet environment. On the Althea firmware side of things, the latest version of our routing software and so the latest version of our router software came out just about a week or so ago. It's beta 17. It has a number of stability fixes. Fixes for the XDAI bridge withdrawal flow, that's finally working again. Several other things, let's see. And, oh yeah, the big thing in beta 17, the thing that makes me excited is that we finally fixed a bug that only comes up after nodes are online for about a month or more. So these sorts of really long-tail stability bugs are where we're at with the Althea software as we focus on scaling and eventually migrating to the Althea blockchain over the next year or so. Now, where we have more experimental stuff going on is over with fiber and LTE. Deborah has been hopping around the country, working on setting up new Althea networks and also setting up new Althea towers. So we have our own. So we are building our own LTE tower implementation that will integrate tightly with the Althea software and allow us to provide Althea internet service all the way to your cell phone, so that you can buy data from the Althea network from anyone running a tower, allowing anybody to run Althea's open source custom tower software that will change the way bandwidth is bought and sold, not only for home internet but also for mobile internet. The final subject we have is fiber, and that is inching ever closer to actual trenching and actually getting some fiber in the ground with our various community projects. While technically we are getting more and more prepared for that, that's still mostly at Deborah's level and Osfi's level as far as planning and getting things really ready to go with our target communities. So that's a quick summary of the Althea technical stack, everything that's going on. Definitely a lot going on, and I'm really excited about everything that we're going to get done over the next year.
I think that's a really great segue into how Althea works with its partners and how we build multi-stakeholder networks that allows everyone to share in a revenue in a transparent way. Actually, I want to just briefly talk a little bit about the network in North Carolina in which we're coming from, in which the city is actually able to run Althea nodes at its water towers and then earn revenue for being part of that network. And then the network itself is operated by Wave 7 Communications, which is a network operator that earns their portion for keeping those routers online and helping the kind of Althea, we sort of decouple our service and maintenance from the actual infrastructure of the networks, allowing for really dynamic and flexible implementations, which is pretty exciting. And with that, Osfi, I'll let you take it away to kind of sharing with us what we got in store for Nebraska.
Yeah, no, certainly. Thank you. And, like I said, really happy to be here. Look, I think before I share with you thoughts on Nebraska, I think it'll be helpful to just share with you conceptually what is attractive about Althea from an infrastructure owner's perspective. And the lens I bring into the conversation is I've been one of those infrastructure owners. In a past life, I helped build and grow a cellular tower sharing company. We were building and buying cell towers in Pakistan so that mobile network operators could share the same equipment. And one of the observations that really kind of even got me started in this whole pursuit of internet for all was when I'd go to somewhat rural areas or suburban areas, I'd see these giant cell towers. They were largely empty, and I'd still see hundreds of millions of people or billions of people not online. And that was quite an observation that also we've got a lot of this infrastructure in places that's underutilized because somehow accessing the space, power, and bandwidth is problematic for individual players to provision internet service. And this goes back to one of the ideas that Justin and Deborah talk about quite a bit. That internet provisioning, internet service is not expensive. It's not last mile networks are not expensive to build; they're expensive to coordinate. And it is like fundamentally a coordination challenge, and particularly the challenge becomes like less and less severe when infrastructure already exists. So all this to say that from my end, the characteristics that were always considered attractive or things that I felt like were needed I felt that complete fund flow visibility was an attractive idea for an infrastructure owner, and the ability to. And again, where I'm going with it is, see, like in order to build networks, it's really important to keep your, I would say, upfront costs low that are at risk. Like whenever the thing with broadband is, because it's not a regulated utility, the builder of the network has to have a very accurate assessment of demand. And accurately assessing demand is quite problematic for investors. And so what they always do is they kind of always overcompensate and take an overly conservative position. Now, this is the norm largely because stakeholders in a communication network have not created systems that give them complete fund flow visibility and complete transparency into how resources are moving around. And Althea does that, right? Like Althea basically gives you a real-time income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow for basically every activity that is going on within a telecom network, and that visibility is very powerful. So that was for me what the big sort of conceptual attraction was, and that's why I think smart contracts are smart contracts on blockchain. Like for me, I view Althea as a smart contract. I mean, okay, I don't want to get lost in the vernacular and explanation. Then you know exactly what. But Althea is a pretty cool application for like what you can do with telecom and blockchain, and like it's a really cool implementation of that, because it provides that fund flow transparency. And when I looked at that, my thinking was, okay, wow. So now with these guys, revenue share deals are possible. And that was a pretty exciting idea, because I thought, wow, if we could just revenue share our way with the fiber operator, the landlords, everybody who's involved, we could like spin up a network with zero upfront capex. And that was a pretty, I would say, it's thought that like inspires me, excites me. So, to test it out, to test out the theory, the first call that NetEquity made was to this fiber operator in Nebraska called OPTK Networks that owns over 10,000 miles of fiber in Nebraska. And the idea was, hey, we've got this really cool method of provisioning last mile services. We want to spin up a network all across the state of Nebraska. But, we're not going to just, start paying you for bandwidth rent up front when we don't know how quickly we're going to ramp up demand. But after communicating, what the features of Althea were, this whole bit around fund flow transparency and auditability and all of that, it was very straightforward from that point to go to, hey, let's just do a revenue share. And so that's the part I'm excited about. OPTK has agreed to do a revenue share with us. They've said, we like what you're saying, and we're also happy to facilitate a little trip for you. So July 12th, Deborah and I are going to be in southern Nebraska, between the cities of Sydney, Nebraska and Lexington, Nebraska, meeting with some town folks, people in those cities. We've shortlisted locations already on, where, because one of the great things that happened with this OPTK partnership, they shared with us locations of all fiber lit buildings. And so we basically then started going fiber lit building by building, asking, hey, landowner, would you like to do a revenue share as well? Because again, right, if the fiber operator is doing a revenue share, or if the tower and landlord is doing a revenue share, right, like, and hopefully soon, the electronic equipment provider also does a revenue share, you literally have spun up a network with zero capex, and it's kind of neat, right? Like you're just like, you have this amazing pass-through mechanism that's just like basically doing the job of an internet service provider or a mobile network operator, but without a management team. And so you can. Why this is such a huge deal? See, like the thing is that, from an America perspective, right? Like if you've got a town with 300 people, it's really hard to serve them because you cannot even sustain one full-time salary in a traditional ISP structure on a revenue from 300 people. And that's kind of where I feel like Althea really starts shining, because it creates the ability to serve very difficult to. It basically takes away a whole lot of overhead, and it makes the whole process a lot more efficient. And and while doing that, it puts a lot more power in the hands of the user. It gives you, I mean, I don't clearly look. I mean, I'm gonna like pause here. I have become an Althea fanboy, as you can see. But I see this just as the first step. My dream ambition here is to run a nationwide mobile network operator in a country like mine, which is Pakistan, on Althea. I think that'll be so incredibly cost efficient that it like putting it on paper, it kind of blows my mind, right? Like what all we could do with it. So for me, I mean, really, really happy, really motivated by this partnership. I think it's the last thing I want to say before I like stop talking about this is, I think the magic of Althea is like, it's not just the tech, but I think it's also like, frankly, in Deborah's nature. I think you need someone like Deborah who says, all right, I'm going to go to town X and I'm going to build a network. Like, that takes a certain amount of audacity, courage, and guts that I've not seen very often. I've like worked with my share of telecom execs and I've been in my share of boardrooms, but like, for someone to be like, you know what, like, I'm going to buy that radio, I'm going to talk to that guy, I'm going to just hang this thing, I'm going to have a chat. That takes courage. That is not easy. That is a very difficult task, and you don't find it everywhere. But see, like, when you get a combination of like really good tech, someone who's fearless, and someone who's willing to learn, that's a pretty powerful community. That's a pretty powerful rocket ship. And so, when I really started like interacting with Althea, I was like, look, I don't know exactly what our partnership will shape up, but I want to work with these people. I want to learn from these people, and I want to like bring to the table what I know, right? And what I know is how to do deals, and how to be in boardrooms, how to argue with lawyers, how to like raise lots of money. That's the kind of work I've done in the past, and now I'm a bit of a free agent, kind of serving the mission of Internet for All, because that, by the way, is like super duper personal to me. Internet changed my life. Went online at the age of 13, and cannot imagine life without the internet. There are just so many people out there who live without the internet. I gave my first TEDx talk on this subject in May 2017, and I closed that talk by saying that I see a future in which a Kalasha girl living in northwest Pakistan will be able to speak into a device in her own language, ask a question about how to treat her daughter's fever, and get that answer. She can't do that today because she probably can't afford the device, and she probably cannot afford a data connection. She probably doesn't have the kind of coverage, right, that's needed to actually make this happen. And also speech to text also has bits of ways to go. So there's some tech that needs to catch up. But like when I first came across Althea, I was like, okay, I think I'm closer to that vision now. I can see a day, I can see a time when we can deploy an Althea network in Kalasha Valley as well, hopefully soon. But for now, we're going to start with rural Nebraska, which is a bit closer, a bit easier. I'm based in San Francisco, by the way, but yeah, let me stop there and turn it back to you, Justin.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was an excellent sort of motivation as to like why we're going after this target, and an excellent summary of the advantages of an Althea network, which is to just sort of remove this enormous amount of administrative overhead and automate it, so that people can instead focus on connectivity rather than figuring out how many dollars the other guy is making. So it looks like Deborah is having some problems with the airport Wi-Fi, or maybe she actually managed to get on a flight towards her actual destination. But layovers aside, Gabrielle, do you have the list of questions for this call?
So Justin, we actually did have one question in the chat from before when Deborah was speaking. I think the connection broke up, and folks in the audience were curious to hear again how Wave 7 was making their money.
Yeah. So Wave 7 has received an ISOC grant in order to deploy connectivity to the town of Enfield, and I believe also some of the outlying area. Don't quote me on that. And Deborah spent the weekend working with them, and you can check our Twitter for some cool pictures, setting them up with some real top of the line wireless equipment on top of what is actually the town of Enfield's water tower. So they are going to be acting as a relay in the Althea network, and earning money as part of a revenue share. So in this case, instead of spending tens or even on the order of $100,000, although you can normally do it for half that, to build a tower, we can just use the existing infrastructure that the town of Enfield already owns, and they will be paid for the value of their infrastructure. And instead of having to spend, somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 building a tower for Wave 7 to serve this town, they can simply get forward to the problem of serving the town. And so this weekend, Deborah helped them put up a number of radios that will help cover the entire area. And from here on out, they are looking to connect the town with faster and lower cost internet, as well as provide free internet to, I think it's somewhere around 20 students as part of the grant.
Amazing. And thank you also for fielding that question for us, Justin. I would encourage anyone from the audience, again, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat on YouTube. I had one question. This is kind of not in the agenda, but I had one question for Osvi, if I may. Yeah?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Thank you also for joining us here too. I really loved listening to you speak and some of the story threads that you were touching on. And one that I was really enamored with was when you mentioned coming online for the first time. And what was that like, coming online for the first time as a 13-year-old in Pakistan?
It was incredible, right? Like, because I was this kid who had been, who had grown up with a certain set of programming, right? Like, I mean, my take is like we're all programs just slowly becoming aware of our programming, right? And I had all this programming that, a kid born in early 80s in Pakistan. Early 80s, we had a military government in Pakistan, and, Pakistan's kind of gone through interesting, I would say, trials and tribulations over the years, still going through it. I lived a pretty privileged life in Pakistan because, like, my dad was in the military. But, so for a lot of my upbringing was basically with that vantage point, right? What you can expect from a kid growing up in a military cantonment. And then getting online was like this shock to the system. It was just like, I found like this way to talk to the other, to the outsider, to someone whose version of the truth is so different from mine, to other stories, to other perspectives. I feel like I ended up overcoming a lot of bigotry that was pre-programmed in me, and through no fault of my own, but other than just there not being exposure. I remember like it was an influx of just like being able to ask questions, get answers. Like I remember like as a student I had so many questions and I couldn't get them answered from the textbooks and the teachers that I had access to, right? Like it just like after and more questions were like annoying for teachers. So for me it was phenomenally profound, and that's kind of why like I'm so like attached to this thing, right? The internet, that like it's such a game changer. And to know that anyway, I don't want to go off topic, and coming back to like to know that half the world can't access it. For me it was magical. I think I remember exactly the first time what all I did. It was a dial-up connection. I remember I went on altavista.com. It was like a search engine. And I remember MIRC, which was like internet relay chat. That's basically how people would just communicate in online chat rooms. Not very nice user interface, but just this idea that you could like speak to another who you don't have access to. It's pretty phenomenal. It's pretty phenomenal.
So agreed. And it could be argued that it's actually very on topic for the internet to be a game changer. So I think you're in good company in that.
No, absolutely.
We had one other question thus far in the chat, and it reads as thus: as I understand the model, Althea partners with communities and also middle mile providers. Can you speak to the difference in how you approach those partnerships? Is there any?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's a great question. I think it's important to just take a look at the recipe of an Althea network, right? Like, and I mean, how we bring the recipe together is kind of secondary. The first step is, what is the recipe? What do you need to get an Althea network started? Okay, well, at a minimum, you need one gateway node, which is to be attached to some kind of wholesale bandwidth, right? Once you have that gateway node, then you need a whole bunch of other user nodes where customers are sitting who have Althea routers that can, get their service through this gateway node. So, in the easiest example, you need like 100 nodes conveniently located in a circle around this gateway node, right? That's the easy. And once you have that, and you have money and an Althea router, you can start browsing, right? Now, one way of like creating this outcome is to first pre-sell the connection to those 100 users and then go look for the most convenient gateway node. That's how I would say most networks today have been built. Pre-sell to a community, get them to buy in, then look for a gateway node, and then start basically marketing in order to create a network, in order to bring people online. The other approach is basically saying there are a lot of gateway nodes out there. There's over 1.5 million buildings in America that have a fiber internet connection. And these are called fiber lit buildings. And, so there's like about 500,000 cell towers, 1.5 million fiber lit buildings. Many of them have space and power and bandwidth available. The other approach says, hey, let's go to these guys and say, yo, I want to just put up a gateway node, but don't charge me any running costs, right? And once I get a gateway node, I can tell people, I've got this network up and running. If you want to tune in, you tune in, right? And so what this approach kind of does is that it kind of changes the order in which demand is originated. In the first idea, you first lock in the demand, then you build a network. In this case, you basically pay for you do some partnerships to create a network, and then you go on marketing to customers. But the partnerships that you do can be done in a way that doesn't cost anyone anything outrageous. And here's why. This is also important to understand, right? Somebody who's sitting on bandwidth at a building, it doesn't cost them anything to do a revenue share deal with you. They've got bandwidth sitting there. It can't go anywhere. If they do a revenue share deal with you, they're not losing anything. It's important, right? The landlord, their marginal cost is also nothing. They let you hang something on their roof. So long as they know that you're not going to cheat them, so long as they know that you will actually pay them $10 for every customer, and that they will never have to chase you with some stupid invoice, they'll also do a deal with you, right? So that's the difference in approach in saying, let's go the other way. And once we've kind of built enough of a network, then just kind of go mass marketing in region saying, hey, look, you want the service, you get it in 1 week. Basically, for me, from a consumer facing perspective, I want to shorten the time a consumer hears about Althea for the first time and gets service. Today, they hear about it, they want to sign up, then they got to wait for the network organizer to build a network. I'm not saying that's a like a flawed idea or anything. That's a fantastic idea. That's how we made 14 networks, right? That thing works really well. And in fact, we needed a lot of those proof points to do the kind of deal we're doing today. But I think today we can just kind of, give every frankly, I think we can give network organizers, much greater ability to grow their networks by saying, look, we've got a gateway node here. Like, for me, that's the exciting part, right? The next step of Althea, basically having a map for our community saying, we've got gateway nodes all over the place. You want to pick a gateway node, start marketing around that gateway node, go for it. Like, this is basically all it takes. More conceptually, right? If you take a look at all the steps these guys have been doing, they've been making the process easier and easier to spin up a network. And so I see this idea that we can basically get like a socket, like a bandwidth socket in every fiber lit building, on every cell tower, in every location. Like, I want to make that process easier. And that's kind of where my head is at. And that's how it kind of links up with the current strategy and the current way of building one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to come at that same question from a little bit of a different or also a more literal interpretation is that just like Osfi was saying, communities, so like when you're working in a community, they care about getting internet access. When you're working with a, and so the like middle mile partners are more worried about revenue in the long term, and they're willing to forego revenue in the short term for long term partnerships. Now, communities want their internet access and they want it fast. The idea, and they care about a lot of this. Now, the two parties care about the same thing. That they both care about getting their cut of their revenue. They both care about not being cheated. They both care about transparency. They both care about it being automated and easy. But the difference between like a community and like a middle mile partner is normally that a middle mile partner is more focused on the like revenue and the transparency in the system, and the community is very focused on, well, I mean, when is the internet going to be at my house? And this is exactly what we're talking about, making a shorter and shorter process by working with these middle mile partners to be prepared to light people up more quickly, because this is sort of where Althea started. I was talking about building a tower before and how we partnered with a community to avoid it. That is, obviously building a tower not only costs money, it costs time, it costs months of time. But now we've come in and put up the antennas just in a weekend. And from there, we can go to providing internet to the community very quickly. They're going to be doing their first installs over the next several weeks. So the community partnerships and the middle mile partnerships work together all towards one goal, which is to make it easier to deploy internet access, and hopefully someday to have a box on every fiber-enabled building where instead of spending 6 months negotiating with a middle mile partner and then signing a 3-year lease for backhaul and then signing another 3-year lease for a place on a tower, you just walk up, you plug in, and you're done, because Althea takes care of the rest through transparent automated revenue share.
Yeah, and I think like the incentive for the ALTG holder is also fantastic, right? 10% of revenue that you're getting, where capex is completely separately accounted for. Like, if we get this whole programming right, which I think we will, I mean, I see very stable, reliable cash flows just coming from, saying, and I love this little incentive structure, right? Like, I mean, as part of this partnership, I signed an agreement with Althea, and whenever the launch etc. happens, I'll have some ALTG tokens, right? Like as a way of like incentivizing, and I think that's a really neat sort of mental model here, right? Because I'm also now thinking, hey, okay, the more I can help this network grow, the more deals we can do, the more valuable these tokens can become. And in any case, I mean, and that creates like a I want to emphasize this, right? Like, how does a guy like me do work like this in the previous world, which is the traditional finance, what some people call TradFi in this crypto world, right? Like, what is that? So people like me are either private equity fund managers. People like me are either, they arrange capital and they do deals, right? And the way they generally get compensated is through this idea of carried interest. They basically tell investors, hey, investors, I'm going to raise money from you. If I make, a healthy amount of return, I'll keep 20% of the profits and I'll give you 80% of the profits. That's kind of how, like, a lot of these deals have kind of worked. But, I find that, like, this idea that, you can actually, collaborate with the community or collaborate with a project like an Althea that is, positioning itself to become a DAO at some point, and you basically become a token holder, you're aligning incentives in a very clean way, because now you're saying like, yeah, okay, I want to, like, for me, like, it's important already thinking about, okay, we've done a partnership with OPTK, we do want to get this network up and running by July, but then which one is the next partnership? And how are we going to get more and more fiber operators and more real estate owners to say, yeah, we like the idea of a revenue share. And like, for me, like, I think the part that I guess I wanted to emphasize is like, I become like naturally incentivized to do more work here, as opposed to constantly going back being like, hey, I need a new contract, or I need to, like, I mean, it's like a more of a, I'm struggling to articulate it, but I just think that, like, I guess here's what I'm trying to get at. Building telecom networks is a very capital intensive exercise. You've got to, like, make a lot of investments up front, and that's why, like, networks are debt ridden. They have to front load a lot of costs. They have to front load a lot of expenses. I feel like, spreading all of that out amongst the stakeholders, I think that's the part that we need to like really make internet for all happen. And I feel like I'm like just wanting to highlight an example of me over here saying, like without Althea or without this whole concept of Althea and the ALTG token, etc., it would be I'd still be thinking, I'd still be struggling figuring out how do I align incentives with this org. And like right now, it's a very simple, straightforward incentive alignment, which is that here is, a piece of what we've created. This is the cash flow profile, and, we can kind of grow together. And I feel like this, when this kind of incentive, when rolled out more, to even potentially, hopefully, to like technicians, to larger, I would say, labor and construction companies that are involved. Like, I think there could be, I mean, I guess this is kind of where the dreamer in me comes out, right? Like, I do think some lovely wealth distribution can happen, or wealth redistribution can happen through Althea, because I'll tell you this, 80% of a telecom network is like construction and labor, right? Like labor does a ton of work to create a broadband network. It's not, the cost is not in the electronics. It's kind of, it's the cost is not in, the cost is in the labor and construction. And there's like a lot more infrastructure to be built, not just in this country, but elsewhere as well. And yeah, I think like for me, that's something that kind of gets me excited that, if we can like, where at like an early stage, hopefully we can keep like incorporating more and more ideas and tools to like, make this process more efficient. And anyhow, getting carried away and off topic, but just kind of wanted to re-emphasize that, look, this is like phenomenally exciting what's happening over here. If you are listening and you're someone, who is passionate about telecom or cryptocurrency, or like thinking about money Legos and how to play with them, and what can be done. But here's something I do want to say, just one word on decentralized finance. So I come from the very traditional finance world, right? I used to be an investment banker, did that whole, used to manage be part of a private equity firm, very traditional background. I've served on boards. The kind of capabilities that exist now with DeFi are phenomenal. Things are happening that, I'm pretty blown away by that. And I think that, it's really like an exciting time to say that, I can see a world, I can see us getting there where we can actually use some of these ideas from decentralized finance with an organization like Althea to, start financing actual fiber networks. Like, when every router becomes like a blockchain wallet that can actually, that gives you like, a money trail on a regular basis. Like there's a lot of very interesting stuff you can do, including like one of the things I've been kind of talking about with some of the community members, other than this project, is trying out a pretty adventurous idea, saying, hey, I will just pay for 1 to 2 miles of fiber, and I will become a relay node. I'm assuming you guys know, like a relay basically gets compensated for like acting as a pass-through, or like basically like acting as a bridge between a bunch of users and a gateway. Right, that's a way to describe a relay. And like I can see a world where like a relay could just be 2 miles of fiber, and the owner of the relay could get compensated for creating that. And that matters a lot from a telecom perspective, because see, the closer humans get to a fiber network, the better their internet becomes, because you want the hop from your device or your computer to the nearest fiber network to be as small as possible. That's like a very key aspect of like bringing better, more affordable internet. So there's like there's some seriously cool and interesting stuff to do here. Collaborating with Althea is super straightforward. If you want to collaborate in some way on this project, just kind of are curious, like happy to talk, happy to share. My mindset on working isn't so much like, hey, if you come to me, I'll tell you what work to do. The kind of the mindset of DAOs, I would say the philosophy with which we're all working is we kind of know what needs to be done. And so, we can share with you, what's happening. And within that, if there's a way that, you want to get involved. So all this to say, if you've heard this whole chatter about what we want to do in Nebraska, and how we want to run a nationwide telecom operator on Althea, and how we plan to finance fiber networks through blockchain wallets. I give them a bunch of like crazy, audacious ideas. But if some of them are like finding appealing, you want to talk, I'm totally game for that, and would love to involve you. Hear your crazy. All of this stuff we're saying is crazy, but to like give you some like just the last thing is finance is crazy, right? The more if you even go just look at like how banking or how fractional reserve banking works, it's crazy. It's resting on this assumption that everybody's not going to pull their money out together. So a lot of this stuff is crazy. The thing with crazy is like if you can make a compelling story and a compelling incentive structure around crazy, you can like will that crazy into reality. And I think we are trying that, and I believe, and that's kind of why I love, like, frankly, these two people, Deborah and Justin. I think they have that kind of crazy, the same kind that I do, and really looking forward to basically just like start building. And yeah, it's been so great being here and talking to you guys.
Speaking of crazy, but also some of the themes we touched on before, like affordability and maybe even real estate and fiber and operators, etc. I think we had two questions in the chat that are also somewhat related. One is a value that net equity could provide would be bringing those relationships with middle mile providers, correct?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Exactly. And also relatedly, Deborah also answered this in the chat as well, but I was wondering if there was any thoughts here on the call too. Do you think there's any potential to do this in urban areas as well, given the amount of fiber lit built already in urban areas?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, frankly, all net equity is doing, all I'm doing is kind of, I'm telling a story. I love telling the story, right? Like, love the internet, love learning about it, love learning about new tech. I'm telling a story, and I know finance, right? I know how cash flows work and all of that. I bring this stuff together, I tell a story. So what is the story that I tell to middle mile providers? Hey, you can make a lot more money. Currently, you're making so many dollars of potential ISP customers. There's all this money you're leaving on the table. And if you try this thing, all this money you're leaving on the table, that'll come in your pocket. Would you like to try that? Like, it's a story. Same thing, there's a story with every, with the landlord. So all this to say, I think there are like different stories to be told in order to, achieve some cooperation, some coordination. Like layer zero is still the people, right? So we are, I see myself part of that layer zero, to tell the story and to basically, do the same. I mean, I'm not like dogmatic on, I want to do only rural, I want to do only urban. This, I think it's important to talk about, right? Why did we end up in Nebraska? Why are we in Nebraska? We're in Nebraska because October of last year, I wanted to build a user-owned fiber network. I had this theory that, home equity line of that fiber increases a home's value by 3 to 5%. Why can't people take a home equity loan and just make fiber part of the property? Electrical systems are part of the property, water systems are part of the property. Why can't fiber systems be part of the property? So went around pitching this idea, made some progress. This guy in Nebraska who was CEO of a utility, he said, let's do it in my town. It's in Sydney, Nebraska. Started talking to some people in Sydney, Nebraska. His friend worked at this OPTK networks. He said, love the idea. This is kind of interesting what you guys are doing. And I said, well, it would really help. Like, if you middle mile kind of didn't charge rent, if we were to build a network. It was like, yeah, we've been thinking around something like that. We call it this thing. And so like, there was like that conversation that had happened, right? So I kind of knew that this guy in Sydney, Nebraska, and this company OPTK, they're well primed to an idea like this. Because it's also important that you don't just walk in with a new idea to a company that's not primed. It takes time, and even with us, I give you a new concept today. It may sound really good, but then you'll wake up the next day, you'll be like, did that really make sense? You'll think about it some more. So digestion is slow. I think it's really important to have that empathy with somebody who's unacquainted with a new idea, to say like, let me work with you as information is digested now. And I think at the same time, like, I think where net equity can provide value, real value, is assessing who is ready for a conversation, the kind that we're talking about, and then having the conversation, and then hopefully once some good results have been obtained, then telling a story about that. Like what's my hope here? What am I hoping for? We're going to put up this network, and then we're going to tell people about it. Then look, you put up this network, this is kind of how it behaves. We had some theories. here's what we're seeing. You can go take a look at it, and this thing works. Let's do more of it. Let's get more people involved. And I think that's kind of how I see, my role in this. I don't think I'll ever, So in that respect, I mean, I think like going forward, could we do something similar in an urban location? Absolutely. Could we do something? There are other partnerships, right? There's one partnership I'm really excited about, and I started working on, is with an electronics vendor, right? Like if you think about a gateway node, it's a bunch of electronics, right? Somebody's making that radio. So basically going to the guy who makes the radio and say, hey, you're selling a radio, how about you just earn a service fee on that radio? You've got a bunch of inventory. So it's kind of like the argument you then make is, hey, you're sitting on a bunch of inventory. You can either put it on sale and mark it down by 20% and try to make your, whatever, commission, etc. Or you put it up on revenue share. And maybe you put it up for 3 months on revenue share, you try it. I think that for me is like the other key thing that Net Equity is focused on, making it very easy for the stakeholders of a broadband network to give a taste, to get a taste, small taste of what this revenue share deal is like. Because I think once they get the taste, once they start seeing every day, every second revenue trickling in, once they start getting it, I think there's a big moment in crypto and DeFi from hearing about it, reading about it, and then tasting it. When you first get your wallet, when you first go on Uniswap, when you first go on SushiSwap, when you first, do something nutty, when you first become part of a liquidity pool, when you first put money in a Yearn vault, there are all these firsts, and all these firsts leads to I would say the word is like, what's the word, right? It's like experiential wisdom. People start getting experiential wisdom around it. Like right now they're being told, hey, if you eat this thing, it's going to taste like this. They haven't eaten it. Then once they taste it, I think we're going to see something different, because I think anyone who's tasted all this, they fall deep. I've seen this time and time again. I'm going through it as well. I am like, as you can tell with all the jibber jabber that I'm doing, I'm falling deep into the crypto rabbit hole, because it's very promising, because it has capabilities that were just not there, right? And these capabilities make it easier to imagine that unbelievably awesome future that just seems crazy, right? Like that, in like a decade, we'll bridge the digital divide. Like that's a pretty right now it seems like, wow, that's a big task. That's a big climb, right? Like, but it just starts kind of feeling there. So that's kind of what I want to do as Net Equity, and let's see. I mean, I'm more than all of this, more than all the serious talk. Look, I want to be upfront about another thing. This for me is a labor of love. I want to have fun with it. I am having fun with it. This is no longer like, oh, Asfi's got a job. I'm privileged as well in that respect. But like for me, this is like labor of love, and I want to, do it, treat it with that kind of a mindset, and then will frankly do whatever jobs kind of comes in the way, because no job for me is like too small to do, in the name of connectivity. I think it's just like it's something I just like really love doing. So long answer, but
Once you taste crazy, you never go back.
I know, I have tasted crazy. I've gone crazy.
Also, layer 0 is always the people, is definitely going to be like now on my mixtape.
Nice.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So
No, it's not mine though. I've heard a bunch of people say it, but just so I don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, I said it. So. But it's the
quality. I think we had another question. Perhaps, Justin, if you want to take this one, does the Althea blockchain run on the routers? What I'm asking is any other equipment required other than the various routing equipment?
Yeah, so that's a good question.
Yeah.
Right now, the Althea blockchain runs on just a Linux server on the internet. There's no particular reason it can't run on the routers, except that they don't have we typically ship routers that are too low spec to actually run the validator software. If you were willing to pay more for your router, you could run a validator on it and the Althea router software at the same time. There's no reason why you can't do it. It's just something that's maybe on our long-term roadmap is to get the cost of a box that is powerful enough to do both low enough that everybody can have it. So in terms of what equipment you may need if you want to participate in every capacity on the network, you'll just need a Linux server. You can use one from a cloud provider, or you can host one in your home, depending on your preferences. Very straightforward. No particularly crazy requirements there. I know a lot of people who are successfully running an Althea blockchain node on like a Raspberry Pi in their closet or something. So yeah, right now the Althea routers and the networking equipment and the blockchain nodes are separate and they talk to each other. At some point we may bring them together, but that's a long-term engineering vision. For the time being, they'll work fine separately.
Cool. We had one other question as well too, if anyone on this call can perhaps speak to it. Can you talk a bit about your marketing strategy?
I can.
So-
there's so many different types. Like maybe Justin should talk about the broader one. I can talk about the one in Nebraska.
Yeah, so I mean, there's different types of marketing here. There's like user marketing, and then there is partnership marketing, and there's marketing for businesses and that sort of stuff. But there's lots of different categories. For the most part, we definitely rely on a lot of word of mouth, and we also do online advertising. In areas where we have existing networks, and those help bring in new users and bring in awareness. But generally, our like marketing strategy is best summed up as we are so focused on building the thing that we have a lot of marketing debt to pay off, and we're getting better at marketing. But the like really incredible thing is how powerful this feeling of having a local community network is, and how much it brings people to the table, and makes them helps them be like loyal customers, and helps us gain users. And in many of our networks, so to speak to what Althea was talking about before, traditionally an ISP comes in and they say, well, how many of the people here can we get signed up on our infrastructure? And they have some conservative estimate, like 20%, or maybe 40% if they're being generous. And, Althea networks are currently, sitting around between 60 and 80, sort of across the board. So that's what, community-focused networks can do, and it's what we want to continue to do going forward, and what we want to get a little bit more sort of professional about, polished about, and have a better way to help people join these networks. Now that's from the user side. Asfi can speak a lot better to the partnership side.
Yeah, look, my world is very B2B or B2G, meaning business to business or business to government. So I'm not thinking so much about, okay, how are we going to get the consumers on board? I can't speak to that. I think we'll make an ad which says get internet for $40 a month if you buy the dish up front, or if you get it for $55 per month if you don't pay for this thing up front, something like that, right? We'll come up with like simple ads. But the way we're kind of going about roughly in Nebraska is taking a more of a top-down approach, like talking to the broadband task force. Governor of Nebraska created a broadband task force, in touch with them. They passed a law called LB 992 for the provisioning of broadband services, talking to the lawmakers who did that, using their kind of references to get introductions with people in a locality to establish a level of trust, so that we don't just come across as like two people who just come into town to build a network. Doing those things, like establishing that familiarity. And the great thing is, like, in all of this marketing, like this stuff I'm saying comes very naturally to Deborah, having built a network in Klatskanai. I think it goes a long way. That's roughly the process of getting stakeholders on board. And yeah, I think I think the one difference that I'm quite excited about is, just basically being able to even potentially do door to door and say, hey, we can get you up and running right now. If you've got an hour, literally maybe once gateway I guess short answer is, once gateway nodes are installed, I am eager to do some A/B testing and also gather some data around, what marketing works really well. Once you have this capability to claim that, look, our site is completely up and running. If you want to get on, we can have you up and running in an hour. I'd like to be able to say that. And then, how all we present it, to who we present it, I think that'll be a function of doing the right kind of testing and then iterating on that, because there's no other way around it.
So I think we've touched on this as well a little bit before. And I guess given the fact that here, again, we're talking about a multi-stakeholder model in Althea and especially focus on this model of incentive alignment, right? I think we've already touched on this, but we had another question come in the chat, kind of hyper-focused on asking, is this meant as well for areas with very good connectivity in terms of optic fiber infrastructure? And if so, how?
Why not, right? Like, my take is, I live in San Francisco. I mean, there's no reason why existing cities can't get user-owned networks. I mean, they'll end up better off, right? But basically, I think what it comes down to is, people in cities, are they hurting enough to try and take action, right? Like, if your internet's kind of good and it's working and you're happy with whatever $50-$60 you're paying, you're like, dude, it's working. I don't really want to mess around with it, right? So I think it's really important to take that into consideration, that your customers got to be motivated a bit. Like, this isn't as easy. It's not like downloading an app. It's a much more involved purchase. You're talking about installing infrastructure. So I think that, customer motivation is a pretty key factor. But, if customer motivation can be built, I've got a bunch of people in my neighborhood who said, dude, I'd love to own our infrastructure. That makes a whole lot of sense. And I mean, so I think we're in very early days of that. My sense is these homeowner associations will be the next early adopters. There are 40 million homes in America under homeowner associations. That is an entity I definitely plan to talk to say, look, we could do even if you are getting served by a fiber provider, you might as well just own the network yourself. Here are all the benefits that you get if you own long-term infrastructure yourself.
I think we're almost at time. I do just want to say a quick shout out and thank you to members of the audience that were asking these questions in the chat. Ivan, Viotti, Denise, Thomas, thank you so much for asking these questions. And also shout out to Deborah. I know she's on her way to San Diego right now. And lastly, shout out to Justin and Osvi. Thank you for joining us for this call. Do we have any final closing thoughts that you want to add?
No. I think just thank you to everyone for coming, and we're excited to keep building more stuff. It's always great to go out there and build new and better connectivity.
And thank you, Gab, so much for moderating, and great to meet you. I hope to meet you in person someday soon.
Likewise, feelings very mutual.
Later, people. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
Thanks all. Bye now.